This video is brought to you by me. For $1 a month, you can support the channel directly and help me keep doing what I love. Thanks for watching and supporting. Welcome to Stillwater, a metropolis with all the potential in the world. Exercise your constitutional rights by buying a rocket launcher at friendly fire. No background checks required. Cheated on your significant other and want to distract them from the pain of betrayal? Stop by On Thin Ice and buy the perfect ring that says, "Next time I'll be more careful." Only one thing is stopping Stillwater from going on the rise: violence. The streets are a war zone for gangs fighting for turf. Currently, the districts of Stillwater are run by 3 gangs. The West Side Rollers, a gang of street racers and motorcycle riders under the control of Joseph Price, a cocky, dumb meathead of a man. There are Los Carnales, a gang of drug pushers who have ties to the Colombian drug trade. They are the oldest gang in Stillwater and are run by 2 brothers, the polar opposites Hector and Angelo Lopez. Lastly, there are the Vice Kings, an organization making major grabs for power in the music industry. Their leader is the suave, calculated Benjamin King. However, there is one small group hailing from Saints Row, a small district in Stillwater, the 3rd Street Saints, led by former Vice King and former best friend of Benjamin King, Julius Little. The Saints under Julius are meant to be a gang that rises up against the 3 other gangs and drives them out of town. You are the newest recruit of the Saints after a member saved your life in the middle of a firefight. You are ready to return the favor by making a name for yourself and rising through the Saints' ranks. Can you work your way up the ladder, or will you get wasted by another gang before you get the chance? The development team that worked on Saints Row was Volition, a team that worked on the Red Faction series and the Punisher game from 2005. Saints Row was going to be their most ambitious game yet, creating an open world with non-linear story elements. The goal was to change how players interacted with an open world. Previously in games like Grand Theft Auto, the story and the open world were hardly intertwined. You were either free roaming or you were playing a structured mission. It's clearly not a bad formula. I mean, look how well GTA sells. Volition instead wanted to bring in a new philosophy to blend missions and exploration into the game to create a more unified experience between the world and the campaign while keeping the narrative as non-linear as possible. Volition achieves this goal by requiring you to earn respect through exploring Stillwater and discovering new activities and side missions. These activities are in many cases not terribly new ideas. They aren't boring, they just aren't wholly new. These are street races, missions where you work as security for a drug dealer during deliveries, and a type of mission where you are given the order to hijack a specific vehicle carrying goods. Where the activities really shine are where Volition injected some novelty into the formula, a theme that would carry through the rest of the series. Insurance fraud is a mission where you run into busy intersections and throw yourself into harm's way in order to get enough cars to hit you and rack up insurance money. Mayhem, or as I like to call it, Fence Murderer Simulator 2005, involves taking explosives and just destroying stuff for points. Other missions are escort missions and similar missions to activities you can find in other games. Besides earning respect for your work, completing all levels of a different activity will grant you specific perks like more health, longer sprint times, etc. This kind of gives you a reason to at least try all the activities in the game. Once you earn enough respect, you can continue to play through the story missions. The bulk of the story has you taking down the gangs opposing you through a series of creative ways. Due to the goal of non-linearity, you approach the gangs in any order you want, take down a whole gang in one set of missions, or do them all intertwined one step at a time. It's really up to you. Your character is a silent protagonist, outside of a couple of very standout moments because you never expect him to talk when it happens.
So what's in here? Guns? Money? Some uncut shit? Shoes?
Actually, they're this season's new.
Bullshit, that's last year's fall collection.
That's not true.
Just let it go, man. No reason to piss off Manuel.
Given that you are a foot soldier for the Saints, you don't really need a voice anyway. You're just taking orders and carrying them out. It also helps that the characters around you are fleshed out and have varied personalities. In the Saints, Julius is the leader, but there are lieutenants assigned to research and strategize how to take down each organization efficiently. Lynn is your go-to for the Rollers information. Her blue outfits and souped-up car made it easy for her to go undercover. She gets cozy with the Rollers mechanic Donnie, and she reports back to the gang while getting closer to Joseph. Joseph never suspects his best friend Donnie is getting duped, so he feels no need to hide any plans. Dex and Troy are in charge of Los Carnales, and their bickering with one another is a high point of the writing. Dex is constantly aggravated by Troy calling the gang the Los Carnales, because that translates to the Carnales.
I got a lead on where the Los Canales cut all their shit.
The Carnales.
What?
Rio Grande River. Jesus.
What the fuck?
It's not the Los Carnales, it's just the Carnales. Los means... Fuck it. Like I was saying, we're not gonna raid the factory quite yet.
He just gets madder and madder until he starts saying it himself by accident.
Fine. Julius, you put me in charge of the Los Carnales. Shit, now you got me saying it.
Lastly, Johnny Gat, the face of the series, is in charge of all Vice King-related action. He's a shoot-first, never-ask-questions kind of guy. His philosophy boils down to, why would I be subtle when I can just go in guns blazing? Gat has a vested interest in the gang. His ex-girlfriend Aisha is the latest star on the Vice Kings record label. He does his best to hide his lingering feelings for her, and she does the same for her feelings about him. I wish they just put their egos and differences aside and just get back together. Each of the Saints lieutenants have their own style of approach, which means each set of the 11 missions for each individual gang feels distinct from the others. Lynn rigs some cars to explode when they overheat, so you're tasked with provoking the racers to go faster and cause their cars to explode. With Dex and Troy, you will be destroying and seizing drug production from Los Carnales, so the Saints will have a new source of income. As you can probably guess, with Gat you'll be taking a bolder, louder approach, like faking Aisha's death by blowing up the record studio and freeing her of her contract with the VKs. None of this would be good without some good gameplay to go along with it, and I think this is where Saints Row 1 really outdoes itself. The mechanic of free aim reticle made gunfights very fun, and removed the headache of hoping a lock-on gets to the right person. It's all on you if you miss because you have full control over the aiming. While Saints Row wasn't the first series to introduce the weapon wheel, the fact that it is here makes hot swapping between all of your weapons fast and efficient. Your wanted level is broken up into two halves. One side is for the police for doing street crimes like hitting people with your car or driving recklessly. The other side is reserved for gang notoriety. If you start messing with gangs on their own turf, they will start coming after you. This creates the potential of being chased by gangs and the police at once, and it gets pretty chaotic. Weapons in Saints Row feel punchy, and when you are firing at enemies, you can feel the impact. It's a bit hard to explain, but if you get the controller in your hand, you can feel it. Weapon noises are exaggerated, like every bullet is a tool of destruction. You can hear the shells falling on the ground. Every time you hit someone, you don't just see them ragdoll. It feels like you made it hurt. When you get headshots, you can hear a pop. It's almost uncomfortable how potent the gameplay here is compared to almost every other game I've played. But one thing is for sure, there are few games more satisfying than Saints Row when it comes to blowing stuff up with RPGs. When Saints Row released, it was in the heyday of GTA clones, and many wrote off this game as another attempt to cash in on the open-world crime game craze. It also certainly didn't help that San Andreas, the critically acclaimed and controversial juggernaut from Rockstar that also focused its story on street gangs, released a year before. But when you actually play Saints Row 1, it makes itself clear that this game wasn't trying to rip off GTA. In fact, it was in production on PS2 well before San Andreas came out. Still, there was a lot of anticipation for Saints Row as it was one of the first major open-world games for Xbox 360. But if we look at where both series went from here, the trajectory couldn't be any more different. Grand Theft Auto 4, the first GTA on 360, looks nothing like Saints Row, and writing it off because of its similarities degrades the quality work that Volition did to create an interesting take on the open-world genre. Yes, Saints Row 1 was the closest it ever was to Grand Theft Auto, but that also doesn't mean it's a knockoff. The series was getting onto its feet and figuring out what worked. In some aspects, it feels primitive, but as someone who has played every entry in the series, it's impressive to see how much stuck from this first draft. The concept of fighting 3 gangs stuck, which is impressive because you have to think about how difficult it is to create 3 gangs from scratch for each new release. Once you manage to wipe the city clean of the rival gangs, things seem to be going pretty well for you. You're promoted to lieutenant, but as soon as you get your new title, things hit the fan. Julius is kidnapped and you are blackmailed by Police Chief Monroe into saving him by assassinating a political candidate. After failing to keep up his end of the deal to let Julius go, you then assassinate Monroe. Once you manage to escape the hellfire of police weapons, you get an invitation to be the guest of honor for Alderman Richard Hughes on his boat, where you'll be reunited with Julius. You've been set up. By assassinating Hughes' political opponent, you have ensured victory for his seat, and now by killing the police chief, you have paved the way for him to scapegoat the Saints. You've done all the hard work of cleaning up the streets and running 3 other gangs out of town. Now there is only one gang left to take all the blame for the violence and corruptions. Before Hughes can put a bullet in you, a bomb goes off on the boat. The camera zooms out. Julius is on the bridge nearby watching the explosion. Before the screen fades to black, Troy is shown holding a police badge. Saints Row balances comedy and grittiness, taking both to their extremes before the game is over. For every fast food restaurant named Freckle Bitches, a spoof on Wendy's, there's a moment like the time you have been shot, stuffed into a trunk of a car, and pushed into the river, leaving Lynn to die below the surface. Without getting too far ahead of myself, I do want to say one last thing about Troy and his character arc because I think it signifies how good the game is about showing instead of telling. I knew he was a cop because I've played the games before, so being able to pick up on the subtlety of how he was written here was interesting. It doesn't happen often, but there are 2 moments where Troy reveals himself as being someone other than who he claims to be. One time on a Rollers mission, he expresses a concern over Lynn's well-being for being undercover.
I don't like the idea of Lynn going undercover. You roll with people long enough, and pretty soon you start thinking like them.
Remember that line, it will come back in just a second. He can empathize with the pressure she is under because he is also sharing that same pressure. The other instance where he gives himself away is after all 3 gangs are conquered. Everyone is part of a montage that shows what they're doing to celebrate. Gat brings flowers to Aisha, Ben King is skipping town as part of his deal with the Saints, and reminiscing on his childhood with Julius. But Troy looks distraught. He's drinking a bottle of wine straight from the bottle, and he looks like he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders, like he's all torn up inside. It comes across like he doesn't know if he should celebrate or not. It's striking in contrast to the rest of the characters, and once you see him with his badge, you start to understand. In the time between Saints Row 1 and the start of 2, Troy has become the police chief in Stillwater, and has cut ties with all of the gang. And yet, Johnny confesses after you save him from the execution at the start of the second game, that once Troy took over, the guards that used to beat him and harass him in jail started to leave him alone.
Yeah, right? You know, it's weird. People inside were betting how long I'd last. See, when I was first busted, guards were always trying to put me in the ground. After Troy became chief of police, it all stopped. Troy must be more forgiving than I am.
It's almost like Troy still feels a little camaraderie with the Saints despite being a cop. That takes us back to the line about thinking like the people in the group you were infiltrating. He had the job of getting intel on the Saints, but he made real relationships with them. I just think it's an interesting bit of character writing that links the 2 games and paints a picture of the turmoil he is reckoning with. Saints Row as a series doesn't get enough credit for doing its own thing like this. After playing the first game, it still manages to do a lot of great things that keeps it unique among the many different open world games that have come out since. It created the identity for the series that would follow for the rest of it. It has a tendency to feel very 1.0 at times, but structurally it's a great outline to balance player freedom and structured storytelling, the goal Volition aimed for in the beginning. So to me, it feels like it was a mission accomplished.